Welcome back to Making a Mod, the video series that's all about, well, making a mod, specifically the current rosters for NBA 2K11. Andrew with you once again, and checking in with an update on the rosters that I am working on, another status report. When we last left off, I'd finished moving all the original players to their new teams, as well as all of the players that I had already created for previous versions of the rosters that fell through a couple of years in a row. I went into more detail in the first episode of this series, but in any event, I've continued to update the rosters with recent moves that have happened since the last episode. I've also updated a few jersey numbers, things like that, a bit of bio data here and there. And having finished that, I actually started putting faces for the players that I'd already created. I had been just going through and creating all the players just to get them all in place, then going through and finishing them later. But I wanted to make sure all the players that I have so far do have their faces, the ones that I wanted to keep anyway. So I went through and assigned the faces that I have. I am short a few at the moment. Once again, I've got a couple of people who've offered to make faces or source them or convert them. Once again, any help that people can provide, feel free to give me a shout out in the comments or in the linked forum thread over in the NLSC forum. But one of the other reasons I wanted to assign the faces to the players that I'd already created that I wanted to keep was to make sure that they were marked as players that I wanted to keep, basically. There are players that I created for previous versions of the roster that I don't need. They're bench warmers, players that stuck around for a season or two. I've just been going through and completing the team's rosters and creating those players rather than prioritizing certain missing players, which was my original approach. So by adding those faces, I was able to, again, mark those players as players I wanted to keep, players that I need to keep in the roster moving forward, and that freed up a lot of players that I don't need to keep, that I can override with new players. So I've gone through and I've done that, and as a result, the rosters are in much better shape. We've got more players that need to be in there, more veterans. Once again, the way I was creating the rosters before, not the best way of doing it as far as making sure all the veterans were in there, so I've corrected course on that. As you can see, those players have all been replaced by more suitable ones, and ones just to round out the roster a bit more and make sure that some of the rosters have got more real players. The Pacers, I think, are the only ones with only 5, so they're lagging behind at the moment. They've got the most players that I need to create, but that is the next step, obviously, in the process. And it's also going to have to mean overriding players, because the rosters work a little bit different to the NBA Live rosters, where you could just continue adding players beyond the created player limit. In NBA Live, you could just flag them as not created, as original players, basically, and then just continue to create players over and over again, as big as I don't think I've ever hit a roster limit, a database limit, I should say, in the rosters for NBA Live. Not the way it works in NBA 2K, however, so I have to override players. In the last episode, I mentioned that I wasn't going to override any original players. That is something I'm going to have to go back on, simply having enough players to override, having already hit the created player limit. So what I'm going to do is override, first of all, celebrities, the developer teams, anyone else that's not needed in the rosters, starting out with players who have only got 1 year pro, or who are rookies, and that's because they have no career stats, so that's one less thing to look at that's inaccurate. I will have to override some players that do have some career stats, and hopefully I can clear that at some point. I'm still looking into that, but it's going to be a very minor issue. Obviously, it's a 2020 season roster starting in the 2010-2011 season in association mode, so there are going to be some inaccuracies anyway. I haven't mentioned it before, but with the salaries, I'm going to basically adjust them for the size of the salary cap in 2010-2011, because you can't change that. So rather than using the inflated salaries of today, I'm going to adjust them. Otherwise, when you start an association game, they're just going to be off the charts. Everyone's going to be over the cap. You're not going to be able to sign any free agents. CPU won't be able to sign any free agents. So I will be adjusting the salary accordingly. The other big thing I did in this particular update since the last episode was to update biodata, years pro and age specifically. And that's another thing that I was going to have to do eventually anyway to make sure that the rosters are accurate, so I wanted to get that done and out of the way. But by doing so, it also allows me to not have to worry about lining up the years pro and ages for players that I create. Any players that I create now will be accurate as of the 2020 season with their biodata. I don't have to worry about inconsistencies, or when I'm going through and updating all the years pro, accidentally updating somebody's age and years pro because they weren't updated before, they were updated before, and basically avoiding any errors and inconsistencies there. So my target for the next episode is to get at least 12 players on every team, 12 real current players that is. Once I do have 12 real players on every team, that's pretty close to being able to release a public beta, although I do want to update tendencies and ratings and animations, things like that first, just so that it's as good as it possibly can be. Although with a public beta out there, people can definitely help me with some ratings and other things I overlook. I mean, over 400 players in the league, it's very easy to overlook something here or there, although I will be doing my best to comb through the rosters, and part of the project will be to continue to update those ratings and tendencies as need be, but it always helps to have a bit of community feedback as well. I expect there'll be some juggling of players as we come up to the start of the season. There's players being cut as we're in the preseason now. Not everybody is going to stick around. Teams are trimming their roster down to 17. I'm not sure what I'll do about two-way players yet. If I do end up creating them, they'll probably just have to go in the free agent pool, but I'll cross that bridge when I get there. The main thing is to get the rosters done, to get all the necessary players created. Now that I have a lot of the pieces in place, it should be a lot easier. It's just a matter of getting the players I need to overwrite now and putting them into the free agent pool as created players, overwriting them and putting the faces in as I've done with the players I've already created through the in-game functionality. And the other thing I want to mention is the reason I do so much of the editing in-game and not through Redditor 2, although of course I am using Redditor 2 to edit anything that is not accessible in-game. I've always found it better to edit as much as you can in-game. That way you're not causing as many problems with the rosters. You can usually avoid crashes, things like that, corruption of files. So anything that can be done in-game should be done in-game. That's always been my philosophy. Can slow the process down sometimes, but it makes it a lot safer, and trust me, it really sucks when you've been doing all this editing outside the game and then you load up the roster and there's a corruption, something's gone wrong and you've lost all that work because you haven't been testing it in-game. That's something I know from experience from working with the live rosters for so many years and having fiddled around a little bit with the 2K rosters as well. It's something I want to avoid, obviously, because then you lose all the work and that sets the project back even more, so definitely want to avoid that. So creating all the missing players, the players I still need to create, that is the priority at the moment. In the meantime, I'll also be doing other things like updating the All-Star team, because I do think I've got all the All-Stars in the rosters now from last season, so I should be able to do that. Updating accessory colors, placing faces, placing the art updates as they come through, and making sure it's a complete update across the board. There are still a lot of placeholder ratings, many placeholder ratings in fact, and yes, they will be updated. I know that sounds like the kind of thing somebody promises and then just doesn't do, but that is not the intention of the rosters. It is never the way that I have done rosters. If you go back and look at my NBA Live rosters, I've always paid attention to detail with the ratings and also taking community suggestions on board as well. So I will be doing the same thing this time around with the 2K11 rosters. Another thing I'd like to stress is that this roster update will be completely free for the PC version of NBA 2K11. I do not charge for mods. I know that's become an issue in our community over the past 4 or 5 years. It's something I haven't liked to see. I'll also be avoiding ad links, that is the plan as well. To help out with our hosting costs, we do have a tip jar on the NLSC and we do have a Patreon, but we're not going to put anything behind a paywall. That's not the way to do things in our modding community. Anyone who's doing that is not working in the spirit of our modding community. So I definitely won't be indulging in that myself. And there won't be any holding back the release for likes on Facebook or retweets or anything like that. Once I get something out that I can release and I'm happy to release and I think the public is going to enjoy, then it's going to be publicly available. I'm not going to hold anything back. Again, that's not the way our modding community should work. I know there are more people in the community and a lot of Facebook modding groups that are doing it that way. Not the way I want to operate, so not the way I'm going to operate. So I'll leave you once again with a progress report and a to-do list for the future. Not too different from last time, but there has been some progress made, and I'm happy to see that over the weekend. Feel good about that. Hope you do too. Thank you once again to everyone who has shown interest in the project so far, and everyone who continues to support the NLSC in any way that you do. I'm looking forward to getting this out as soon as possible. Once again, don't want to set a concrete date at this time, because that's the way these things fall through, and there are things that get in the way, other projects, life, work, all that kind of stuff. So I'll do my best and keep you all informed through further episodes of Making a Mod. But I am looking to get it out by the start of the season, or certainly around the start of the season. Right now, it feels like it's progressing pretty well, so I am happy about that and hope to have some more good news for you soon. So until then, thank you for checking in and take care.